Hey listeners, I just hosted Henri Stern, co-founder and CEO of Privy. Privy is a wallet provider that was acquired for an undisclosed sum by Stripe over the summer. It made its name for bringing the kinds of smooth logins we've come to expect on the internet to crypto, which has historically had pretty bad onboarding flows. Privy also does much more than this. It's recently been working on letting protocols pay gas fees for users, for instance. It was good catching up with Henri, as Privy is one of the most respected wallet startups in crypto, and it also provided a sneak peek into the crypto ambitions at one of the world's largest payments companies in Stripe. I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. This episode is brought to you by Katana, a DeFi-first chain built for deep liquidity and high yield. You'll be hearing more from them later in the show. Blockworks Digital Asset Summit, which is crypto's premier institutional event, is back in London October 13th to 15th. It'll have speakers from leading global funds, financial institutions, DeFi protocols, crypto companies, and policymakers. Think BlackRock, Circle, Coinbase, the UK Parliament, Jito and Marinade, all under one roof. Notable names include Joe Lubin from Consensus, Hadley Stern from Marinade, Rebecca Reddick from Jito Labs, a whole bunch of Blockworks folks, and more to come. There's a VIP dinner October 13th, open to speakers and VIP ticket holders only. That will sell out, so act fast. And it's all going down at Old Billingsgate, London. Use the code LIGHT100 for £100 off at checkout. We'll see you there. Nothing said on Lightspeed is a recommendation to buy or sell any investments or products. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and the views expressed by anyone on the show are solely their opinions, not financial advice or necessarily the views of Blockworks. Our hosts, guests, and the Blockworks team may hold positions in the company's funds or projects discussed. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. I'm your host, Jack Kubinek, joined today by Henri Stern, co-founder and CEO of Privy, a wallet startup that was acquired by Stripe over the summer and is working on all sorts of interesting things now. So very excited to have you here live in person to talk wallets and all things Privy. Henri, thanks for coming on Lightspeed.
Thank you for having us.
So this was like a big Stripe week, I guess, which was one of the reasons we were interested to bring you in. You know, yesterday was Stripe Tour in the Javits Center in New York, the lovely Javits Center. And I was there. It was very filled with, TradFi people, more than I'm used to as someone who mostly goes to crypto conferences. So I think you mentioned you were trying to track me down as I tweeted about how scared I am of all the TradFi people at the Stripe thing, but it maybe gave me some empathy for you, Henri, who now that is kind of your life, is hanging out with more of the TradFi folks.
It's true. We have to look for hoodies, for mustaches, all the telltale signs of crypto people being around in order to find your brethren in these conferences.
Yeah. This sort of segues into the first thing I wanted to ask you about, which is just, we have not spoken before, and I haven't heard kind of anything post acquisition. So I'm just curious to ask, why did Stripe want to acquire Privy? Because I think on one hand, it makes total sense with Stripe being this global payments provider, stablecoins becoming a much more core part of its stack, and Privy, being pretty well known in crypto for being a very simplified, user-friendly wallet startup, wallet company. Anyone who's used the Privy flow knows that it's just very simple. But at the same time, I sort of see Privy as like a social media sign-in, that's how I first encountered you guys, right? With OpenSea and things like that. And so Stripe is not exactly that. So I'm just curious why this made sense as the right company for Stripe to acquire.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer it maybe in 3 different ways. So sorry for being long. I'll give you the bottom line up front. I think the first is that, your impression of Privy is commonplace, but probably only part of it. The reality is that the business from infancy has changed and grown a lot. And we serve today everything from, neobanks, payments companies, and DeFi protocols into consumer products. And so actually, I'll start with that one first. We count as customers folks like, Jupiter and Hyperliquid and Bitso and, also Farcaster and OpenSea and Frentech and Pump. And so it's just a very wide variety of customer set from traditional fintechs all the way to very crypto native like social networks and everything else in between. And so I think we were very lucky early on to build a differentiated tool that was used by the types of customers that you mentioned. But today, actually, our work is pretty well split across a spectrum. So that's maybe the first part, where I think we bring to bear an understanding of both how do you build secure systems, but how do you make the UX of these secure systems palatable to people who are maybe otherwise uninterested in the intricacies of how the blockchain works. But yeah, I think Privy, moves billions of dollars, or helps consumers move billions of dollars of assets every month, but does so in a way where you don't need a crypto PhD to actually interact with them. So I actually think that is part of the value that we bring into the space, which is if we are to take crypto mainstream, how do you actually make these systems work for people who otherwise don't care about crypto? So I think that's maybe the first part, hidden in the question to some extent. I think the second is, broadly, Stripe is coming into crypto in a big way and is very excited about what these rails can unlock for consumers the world over, for businesses the world over. Like, the reality is, their business is money movement to a large extent, and here are these rails via stable coins that enable it to be faster, cheaper, global, that unlocks dollar access for everybody. And I think the question, as you start working on lighting up these edges of a graph, is what happens at the nodes. Like, okay, Stripe acquired Bridge and saw this is an incredibly powerful rail, but where does the money end up, and how can we help these businesses and these users have accounts through which they can actually program the money? And so I think, to me, that's the interesting part, is there's crypto as a rail, and then there's crypto as a set of programmable assets and primitives. And I see Privy a lot as like the account system through which you have that programmable primitive. So that might be the second reason. And I think the third reason, frankly, is like genuine curiosity and willingness to engage with crypto beyond stablecoins, understanding that stablecoins are an extraordinarily important primitive, but you can only conceive of them in the context of everything else being built. Like, in a sense, stablecoins are a program. I mean, that's literally what they are, right? Stablecoins are a program, and cryptocurrencies are the means of running an entire computer that has other programs. And so if you're starting to think about stablecoins, you might want to consider DeFi. How do we get yield? And, part of it might be via the stablecoins and the investments that they're sort of put through. But as interest rates come down, potentially things like Aave or Morpho become really important. And so I think there was also an interest in bringing on a team that has been working kind of in the trenches to help sort of complete and build out these offerings.
What's the implication of that, to say that stablecoins are a program? Like what does that mean more broadly?
It's a good question I haven't pondered. So I'm going to try to make something deep that maybe wasn't. Let's see if I succeed. So I mean, first, I think it's a fact, right? USDC, to my knowledge, is a few files. It's a few thousand lines of code, and it determines the conditions under which assets can be minted, assets can be burned, and various other entry points into the program functionality that these assets have. So the fact, though, I think, it literally is a fact, and that's why the money is programmable, is because it is literally smart contracts. I think the implication, though, to me, as I think about, the proliferation of assets and the proliferation of chains in the world, is probably that, and this is an old truth, but the best product doesn't always win. And I think basically we have to think about usability, utility, and power beyond the program itself. And so when you think about, Circle is a public company that I shouldn't profess to know anything about beyond what anyone else who's like on crypto Twitter knows. But the reason they've built something valuable is everything that goes beyond the program. Anybody could have written the few thousand lines of code, or at least a certain number of people could have written a few thousand lines of code. In fact, today, anybody can fork it literally and build, Henri USD, which no one would use because there's all of the other things that you have to bring to bear to build a healthy ecosystem for an international sort of a global currency system. And I think this is, to your point about the week Stripe has had, this is where open issuance and the stuff that Bridge is building on that front is extremely exciting in enabling anybody to actually leverage their own stable coins and have more flexibility in terms of how they want the yield thereof to be distributed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, it's maybe in some ways our imagination is almost limited by what we have historically always known money to be. But if money is now just code, then, like you said, you can do open issuance, you can do agentic payments, all these other sorts of DeFi, like these other kinds of things.
And I think actually you put your finger on it. Agentic payments is, I think, another very real motivator for what are the emergent properties of these systems that we haven't seen today. This is a sentence I'm wholesale stealing from Zach at Bridge, but some version of most fintech innovation to date has been credit cards. If you look at the most successful fintech companies, they've all been through the wave of cards becoming a thing. And the unlock for cards and card growth was the internet. The unlock for stablecoins and stablecoin growth might be AI. And the fact that if agents have to trade, then they should do it with a natively digital currency. I think the thing that I was going to add is this is the part that to me makes it so important to work with crypto natives if you are going to build in stablecoins. And so my point about this is a program, but you should understand the computer, is there are going to be emergent properties that we can't predict yet. To me, flash loans is one of the most interesting things that like is only possible on these rails. But I think there will be a number of others. And I think if you're not working at the frontier across how do we deploy these systems at scale, but also who is doing novel things with these systems that we couldn't have anticipated before, I think crypto will fall short of the impact it could have in the world if it's actually pushed.
Katana is an L2 built for DeFi, and it's pioneering the ecosystem category of productive TVL, believing that chains should be graded on how efficiently assets are put to work in DeFi, rather than just total value locked. In just a couple months, Katana has surpassed $500 million in TVL, with over 90% of that TVL being productive in ecosystem on apps like Sushi and Morpho, which also receive boosted yields from Katana's unique Vault Bridge design. From now until the end of November, users that bridge to Katana can earn boosted yield from CAT incentive campaigns, added Vault Bridge yield, and other chain revenue. Major app launches will be coming down the pipeline in the next few months, with incentive campaigns for the Kensei Memecoin Launchpad and Perpstex partners for Katana. With the launch of Katana's chain-wide V tokenomics model, VCAT holders will be at the middle of the Katana flywheel, directing emissions and earning fees for their votes from partner protocols. Thanks, Katana, for making this episode possible. As always, investments in blockchain technology involve risk. Terms and conditions apply. Do your own research. Okay, so that's maybe the future vision of what these things could be. And I do want to talk a bit more about agentic payments at some point. But I guess first, one of my takeaways from the Stripe event yesterday was that, when companies announce crypto initiatives, there's a range of levels of seriousness that they approach it with. So we've been hearing about the JP Morgan blockchain for like 10 years or whatever. And I don't think there's any serious, no shade to them, but I just don't know if there's anything actually serious there. The Stripe is like very serious about crypto, I think was my takeaway from this event, insofar as it signals the company's priorities. Like crypto is very much at the forefront. And so I wanted to ask you, being kind of core to this crypto infrastructure, like how much of, I think everyone has this sense that, okay, Stripe, it's acquired Bridge, it's acquired Privy, it is building or incubating this Tempo blockchain. It really cares about crypto, but like, can you actually concretely explain like what in the Stripe stack is going to be crypto going forward? Like what real things are getting built out within Stripe involving crypto?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about two things. And actually you hit on a point, the question, why Privy? One thing that to notice, to my knowledge, we are the most scaled embedded wallet provider out there at this point. So we make wallets accessible to any developer who wants to build money rails into their product and who wants to build programmable accounts into their products. And to my knowledge, at least, we have about 100 million accounts deployed across 1,500 plus customers. So that's part of it.
And can you real quick just define embedded wallets, I guess, because that's an important piece.
Yeah. So basically embedded wallets, wallets by historical design, and for the most part are a consumer product. You download this app, you download this browser extension, you have a key management system that securely, hopefully, holds keys on your behalf, and two, includes all of the RPC calls and connections to node providers, connections to on-chain indexing, and basically gives you access and connectivity into the on-chain world. So you can see assets, and then you have swapping, bridging, on-ramps, but that is the wallet pack for a consumer. Embedded wallets basically say for a lot of applications where the goal is the application itself and crypto is an enabler rather than the goal is crypto and the application is a means to using crypto. The app developer, the builder, wants to actually be able to bake the interactions more deeply into their product. And so embedded wallets are basically a developer tool that enables developers to build secure self-custodial systems into their product directly so that a neobank can have a stablecoin account alongside their fiat account, so that a social network can have a built-in wallet, so that a game can reward you with actual currency at the end of a session, but all without you having to sort of think, oh, I'm doing this through crypto, or I'm bringing these things into play. So that's kind of what we worked on and what we've helped shape, I think, as an unlock for basically bringing the space to more people. And the point I was making is, you talked about when people launch things, there's various levels of seriousness. One of the things I was going to bring up, and at least one place where I feel like there's sort of, it's very self-serving, so bear with me. But I think one thing I've always admired about Stripe is basically the seriousness with which products are launched and the care for craft that they have in the things that they do. And I think one way in which we always sought to set ourselves apart at Privy was we should basically make sure that when we launch something, it works. It seems very simple, but I think there's docs, you can go to them, you can try it, it functions. And so, for example, we launched last month integrated gas sponsorship. So you can now basically pay for gas on behalf of your users for any EVM or Solana chain. We launched it with, I think it was in the tens of millions of transactions having been put through the paces by the time we launched so that anybody can hit it and it's like production ready. And so I think that's one thing that you're right. Basically, I think Stripe is very serious about crypto. I think they're a very founder-led company and they go sort of very hard conviction on the things that they go on, and they're making like sort of long-lasting investments into building this. And that's hopefully one way in which hopefully they thought it would be a good fit to work with Privy. To actually answer your question, sorry for that very long ramble. I kind of think there's like two parts to this. The first is Stripe ultimately wants to enable, wants to grow the internet's GDP, wants to enable global commerce to be simpler, faster, cheaper, accessible to all. And it seems it sort of stands to reason that if you have this global money rail that can be used anywhere in the world, that maybe has, a stable currency system backing it, that's inherently programmable, then it's a very powerful lever to growing the internet's GDP. And so in a sense, I think of it through two prongs. The first is where can Stripe itself, as a developer tooling company, become a purveyor of systems through which you can do this, AWS for money. And this is where, Privy or Bridge as products that exist wholesale and that continue to build are sort of building blocks into how you would build stablecoin or crypto applications, and Stripe wants to enable developers to do this. So that's part one. Part two is, Stripe already serves, I think it's like 1.3% of like global GDP goes through Stripe rails. I think that's the number. And so it already has massive distribution through a number of partners. And I think the question they're asking themselves is, what of our products would be supercharged if they could have an additional rail that is natively digital through crypto? And so I think you saw this in the Shopify launch that they did alongside Coinbase this summer to enable Shopify merchants to receive crypto. And so I think this is the broader question is, across the Stripe surfaces, across their marketplace products like Connect, across pay-ins and ways people can pay and payouts, as you see crypto's footprint grow in the world, I think Stripe wants to be a very sort of natural adopter of this technology to enable people to pay and receive better.
This is an idea that's been around for a while, that you could allow merchants at like the point of sale to accept crypto and alongside fiat or something like this. But that's no guarantee that merchants will actually want to accept crypto. I think last summer, as kind of a personal exercise, I was like, okay, I'm going to get some USDC on Solana, put it in my wallet, and then go and try to find somewhere on Shopify to pay in stablecoins. Yeah. Because Solana Pay and Helio had like this Shopify Pay plugin that merchants could use. And what I found is that it was actually quite hard to even find like things that I could buy with stablecoins. I think I ended up buying coffee from Raposa. Shout out to Raposa Coffee.
Early adopters.
Yeah. But for the most part, it's like just because these tools are available does not mean that people are necessarily going to use them. And so I guess like do you just see a world where Stripe actually switches its like rails wholly over to crypto rails so that like all that 1.3% of GDP or whatever is going through stablecoins? Or B, is there a different path to where merchants are actually accepting stablecoins as opposed to fiat?
Yeah, I mean, both, I guess, is the answer. And I think the hope basically is that through the latter, we get to the former, meaning by building systems that are good enough, then we get to a place in which it actually makes most sense to send the majority of transit through these rails as opposed to any others. But I'll give you two ways in which I think about it. The first, we're talking about a two-sided marketplace. There's the consumer having to pick the payment rail they want to pay with, and there's the merchant having to choose to whether they accept it or not. I think merchants are simple in that merchants will prioritize the rail that gets them the highest velocity of money, that gets them paid. Understandably so, that's the goal. They're trying to sell their wares. They're not trying to think about payment systems. I'll give you the opposite story of your Raposa story. The opposite story is I did the same experiment this summer, and I was like, I'm going to start paying for coffee with crypto. I think of the 3 times I tried it, I think for 3 of them, I ended switching and being like, fuck this. Like, I don't have 15 minutes to like buy my coffee. The connector experience is a little bit broken on mobile. The connection, my mom texted me in the middle of like my switching out to Phantom. And so like the connection dropped. So I actually had to like restart the connection, and there's people in line behind me that are a little annoyed that like I'm taking so long to do this. And so I had to like switch to credit card because it was easy. And so I think that to me, the point is this, which is if we can make the products better for consumers, and I think we're at a time where we can, then it becomes much easier for us to make the case for merchants that you will get more if you use these rails. And at that point, the debate is over. And the reason why I say now we can, I'll give you an example. It used to be that you had to have the buyer and the seller match in terms of their expectations of what chain and what asset they wanted. If I'm a Ethereum holder on Arbitrum and my merchant wants to receive USDC on Solana, then tough luck. I'm trying to pay with yen in New York. But the reality is that the on-chain infrastructure that's being built has come a super long way. And so today we can abstract away a lot of this. We can make it that the Ethereum Arbitrum holder can actually pay someone USDC on Solana without either party having to think about the connection or the transfers. So I actually think the rails are getting much, much better, which enables much smoother experiences. I think the wallets are getting much, much better, which makes it that you don't have to keep switching between apps and so on, or at least it's a different kind of wallet for some of these experiences. And maybe the long-term last thing I'll say is there's kind of 2 dualities I think a lot about, which is consumer versus business and US versus global. A lot of stablecoin usage today is B2B, not B2C. And that is because there is, you and I buying coffee, but then there's a company trying to do treasury management with global operations across the world. So imagine Coca-Cola has bottling plants in 15 countries. They have to keep a certain amount of reserves in local currencies in each of these countries that they then pay out to pay glass makers and, people who make like bags in each of these countries. It's a major drain on their reserves. It's an extremely complex thing. If they could switch to basically having magic internet money in the cloud that gets beamed down in real time to need, it's a major cost saving for them. They have far fewer capital requirements. They get instantaneous payouts to all of their vendors globally, and so on and so forth. And so what I'm saying is I think B2B can be in ways training wheels for what will end up being the, I think, hardest UX standard, which is B2C. That's the first one. And then there's global versus US. The US already has the dollar by definition. And so the need for some of these rails, I think, whilst it exists, is more limited than countries where you intrinsically are craving a stable currency. The fact that Tether, this is a line I'm stealing from folks at Zero Hash, but the fact is Tether is the first 0-100 hedge fund in the world. They charge no management fee, but they take all the carry. And the reason they get to do this is because people want to hold dollars, and so they don't care about having no yield. So long as you can do this. And so this is the US versus global divide. So I actually think a lot of people will put up with subpar experiences on a global scale, which will also allow us to work through it. So the time is now, in my opinion, in that crypto enables you to build more efficient businesses and more global businesses. And I think through this, we'll see adoption and sort of these rails becoming more fluid for everybody. So this is why I say both. I think we have to find the niches in which today this solves real key problems. And I think through it, I believe that the majority of the 1.3%, and much more, in fact, is going to go through these rails.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of a non-answer, but you satisfactorily.
Wait, sorry. What was the non-answer? I didn't mean to dodge.
Well, no, I mean, like when I hear it's both, I'm like, okay, whatever. But the way you explained it, I'm saying that I actually really do agree with.
Well, I just think, there's no. I basically what I think is, we are a crypto company. Privy will not work on this. I think Stripe wants to build the best experiences for its users.
Yeah.
So there is no like pact in blood of we will do this even if it is worse for the users. They will not. But they believe that it will be better for the users, and that's why they're investing heavily. But it's up to us to build it.
Yeah. What do you think about? So like this is a Solana show typically,
Sure.
and I brought you on because I think you're like Privy is a really interesting, useful product, and you have some interesting takes on crypto broadly. But I'm curious, Solana. You talked a lot about how chains are being abstracted. You can move money around between blockchains fluidly, and it's no problem. I think a lot of the Solana thesis is that actually everything should be, on this one globally shared ledger, where you have access to all of the state, and you don't have to do these cross-chain bridge things with all their warts and whatnot. And so I'm curious. It feels like you sort of disagree with the Solana thesis a little bit, that there would be this one monolithic chain that comes to dominate a lot of the crypto activity. But I'm just curious how you approach that question.
Yes. Which is to say, I think I disagree with the thesis. And I also think Solana is building something unique and insanely valuable. I don't believe we are headed for a single chain world. I think if only because VCs have completely fucked up the incentives for the space, and like there is just too much value in building this. And so you could say, the Galaxy Brain view would be over 50 years, all of the parasite chains will run out of money and the one true chain will emerge. But I just don't think that's true. I think systems can be optimized. And in the same way that you don't use your iPhone for what you're using your MacBook for, I think, maybe the iPad is a good form factor. Maybe it's not. There's going to be question at the edges. But I actually think optimization matters. And so I was talking to somebody from Anza a little while back, and they were talking about some of the privacy primitives they were trying to build into Solana directly. I thought, man, that is a very differentiated feature. That is a very exciting path to move if we want to move more of this like merchant volume. Like, I think privacy has been a major letdown of crypto over the last, call it, decade and a half. Like it stood to reason that we would do a lot more than we have by now. And I think the revealed preference is people mostly don't care, or at least pseudonymity is good enough, which probably shouldn't be. And I actually think TradFi entering the space is probably actually going to be a rebirth of privacy for crypto. And I think the chains that choose to focus on it will benefit sort of heavily. And I was excited about this conversation I was having with somebody from Anza. And so I think my point is, I've seen so much more care for product and craft on average from Solana builders who are extremely pragmatic. I look at, Mike from Sling. I look at the folks from Pump or Jupiter, or, these teams that we work with, and they're extremely thoughtful about their users that they understand really well. And I think that's like kind of a cultural precept of like Solana that is like unique in the space. I don't think, or at least I don't see any chain that would be the one true chain, because I think everything's about trade-offs. And so this is going to be an annoyingly nuanced answer, but I disagree with the thesis, because I think by focusing on something, you give up something else. You give up modularity in exchange for speed. You give up. And so that's why I just think we're headed for a multi-chain world.
Yeah.
And that's been a major thesis of Privy, by the way, which is to say we are multi-chain, and we have native bridging into Solana, and we have our policies on Solana, and we have gas sponsorship on Solana. And the point is, you should be able to build across both. And we do a lot of things so that the library feels idiomatic. Like, for example, we have wallet connectors so that you can connect any Solana wallet to your system via Privy. They're built on Kit, and I think we're one of the first folks to build on that library, which means we have broad interoperability with every other sort of Solana connectors, and that's very Solana specific. But I think it's just because there's so many interesting things being built on Solana that we are super focused on the space. But that's not because we think there's, I don't know. I've been anti chain tribalism for a while.
we need more folks that are that way, for sure. Walk me maybe from a dev builder perspective. Where is Solana today? There's a lot of narrative about internet capital markets and let's have every asset be exchangeable on Solana. But from someone who's actually building the on the ground infrastructure that would accomplish these types of things, how good is Solana today in your view?
So first, let me just say I know nothing. So I can run my mouth, but I'm just excited about people building and doing more, and I think that is worth just all of our attention and praise. I think Solana is extremely pragmatic and deep in interesting ways. I think the way Solana has built priority lanes, I think, the account, not specifically, but or at least not originally, following Tolly, following Mert, the Solana people are very thoughtful about trade-offs and about sort of pragmatic decisions to serve the end user. In terms of where Solana shines today from a market perspective, the thing I see is real velocity of money. The reality is that capital flows much more efficiently through Solana than most other ecosystems I've built. And you see it through, call it end of last year to beginning of this year, meme coins to perps. You just see the capital moving in a way that I don't think other chains have been able to do. I don't know why that is, but that's at least what I'm seeing. From a builder perspective, I think Solana, the entire sort of node infrastructure, RPC systems, and the way in which folks like Jito and so on have built systems makes things very simple, which is great. I think connectors and having people bring their own wallets is way harder than it should be, and this is where Ethereum has had more standardization around wallet connectors, which makes your life easier if you're trying to build something where anybody can bring their own wallet into the space. And I think the thing I'm looking most at personally is DeFi adoption on Solana. I think as stablecoins pick up, and I think stablecoin adoption on Solana is quite good. I wish I could announce this, but I can't. But I'm seeing many major fintechs working on Solana rails, and I believe that in 2026 you will see major launches on Solana for stablecoin driven traditional fintech work. And I think the question is, once you've put these assets on a digital sort of substrate, how do you put this money to work? And are the DeFi rails going to be there is, I think, the biggest question that I have. And today, Solana has a ton by way of trading. But I think questions of, as normies, I hate the word, as people who don't otherwise care about crypto, get access to digital assets and want to put it to work, is Solana the best environment in which to do it is the thing I'm most excited and curious about.
Yeah. And I think there's also, it's the case that Solana has a ways to go. I was talking to someone at the Stripe thing yesterday, kind of about why build Tempo, and they were kind of making the case that look, if we're gonna do this actual, all of Stripe's infrastructure comes on chain or whatever, Solana today is just actually not high throughput enough to handle all. This person was arguing, I'm not going to get into the nerd snipes of it because I don't really know, but they were making the case, that in a real world case, Solana would not be able to handle all of the throughput that Stripe would require. And so you need something like Tempo, which to my understanding will make certain design trade-offs around being very scalable and fast. And Solana is currently undergoing this Alpenglow upgrade that's going to make finality much faster on the network. And there are optimizations that Anza has been working on throughout 2025 that, there's this compute limit that probably needs to go away. There's all sorts of ways that Solana is becoming better. And I think that if you asked, could Stripe wholesale, move on to Solana today, the answer is probably no, I would think. And so until it is in that shape, it's probably fair to say that the world needs to be multi-chain.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question, this is the XKCD comic of we have too many standards. I have it. Let's come up with the 15, let's come up with a new standard to unify it all. And then now you have 15 standards, not 14. It is a real question, which is where do we want to explore versus exploit? Are we still building out this technology, or are all the rails set and we should just adopt? And I think the sense again is that Stripe as a whole is very pragmatic and wants to use the best rail for the job. I think to your point, from a throughput perspective, no chain today can support global commerce. But then, I think there's a number of other features that a payments focused chain needs. Innate like batch transactions, the ability to pay for gas in any token, so that the reason why I didn't get my coffee is because I had the USDC, but I didn't have Sol in my wallet, and so I couldn't actually some versions of these things happening on various chains. So there's being able to sponsor those. There's priority lanes for payments, so that if there's a big NFT drop or if people are trading aggressively at a given point in time, your cost for making a purchase doesn't double, even though the underlying good hasn't changed at all. So I think there's a number of things that, again, it's about trade-offs and part of it. And for what it's worth, you said this, but Stripe's incubating Tempo. Tempo's run as an independent project. Yeah. I think Matt had an interesting. I would do a shot and chaser is Matt's L1 versus L2's tweet, followed by Mert's analysis of the tweet. But it was a version of we don't want to be beholden to other timelines and other roadmaps. People are focused on various things, and if we're optimizing wholly for this one use case, there are trade-offs that we'll need to make that others might not. And so that's, I think, kind of how at least I view the world, which is this is going to be a payments chain that is focused on building the best outcomes for people who want to use this shape of thing that Stripe mostly uses today. I think from there, as the world evolves, the goal is to build this. Now, I actually am very excited that there are more folks focused on payments, because I think payments has hereto not been a great use of blockchains, which is crazy. The other thing I think I'll mention, at least as Privy, is that we really just want to work with whoever builds the best product for our customers. So when we work with a trading venue, we'll work with the chain that they ask us. And so we were very much building for a multi-chain world in which we can actually sort of healthily recommend whatever chain is best for the job, and frankly just let our customers decide. So that's mostly how we work.
Do you guys do stuff with Fuse on Solana?
We do. In fact, there's an interesting sort of dual relationship here, which is to say Grid uses Privy. So Grid is another project by the Squads team.
Oh, okay.
And so Grid uses Privy, and Privy in turn uses, unrelatedly, but Privy happens to also work with Squads in how we do Solana gas sponsorship.
Yeah.
So we've had a number of implementations built with Fuse as a smart contract layer or smart contract account atop Privy. It's not something that is like a default that comes out of the box yet, but it's something we've seen built quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Katana's an L2 built for DeFi, and it's pioneering the ecosystem category of productive TVL, believing that chains should be graded on how efficiently assets are put to work in DeFi, rather than just total value locked. In just a couple months, Katana has surpassed $500 million in TVL, with over 90% of that TVL being productive in ecosystem on apps like Sushi and Morpho, which also receive boosted yields from Katana's unique Vault Bridge design. From now until the end of November, users that bridge to Katana can earn boosted yield from CAT incentive campaigns, added Vault Bridge yield, and other chain revenue. Major app launches will be coming down the pipeline in the next few months, with incentive campaigns for the Kensei Memecoin Launchpad and Perpstex partners for Katana. With the launch of Katana's chain-wide V tokenomics model, VCAT holders will be at the middle of the Katana flywheel, directing emissions and earning fees for their votes from partner protocols. Thanks, Katana, for making this episode possible. As always, investments in blockchain technology involve risk. Terms and conditions apply. Do your own research. Interesting. Okay, because I know Fuse at some point was working with Bridge as well, and so there's some relationship there.
Yeah.
Fuse is like one of these teams that their public perception maybe is like not correspondent with like how highly thought of they are behind the scenes. Like I think people really like Fuse, but it's not, a project you hear a ton about, or it's not super active on CT or all these types of things.
Maybe there's a correlation there.
Also, ex-host of this podcast is now at Fuse. I think still. He was at Fuse. He left this podcast to go to Fuse. So shout out to Garrett, our good friend. I'll hype him up. But Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit, because I think there's an interesting question about like building a wallet provider as a business, and in sort of erstwhile eras of crypto, a wallet app was like a, you know, economically beneficial thing to build. But it feels like in this most recent cycle, you're seeing a lot of apps. You're not really seeing any new wallets. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but you think back, like Fireblocks raised a ton of money. Ledger, I believe, did as well. Phantom is really big, but they're now like Series C, I want to say. There's you guys who just were acquired. And outside of that, like I think, you know, MetaMask obviously exists within consensus. A lot of the wallets that we have are the wallets that we have, and it doesn't seem like that pool is growing.
Yeah.
And so, but other things that have always made money, like launching a new L1, are still happening. Sure. Obviously, like people still want to do that and get the L1 premium and all these things. So how do you think of like the business landscape surrounding wallets, and why is it the case that no one seems to want to launch crypto wallets anymore?
So as someone who is, you know, competing with, actually, I think all of the wallet like that you named serve different purposes. So like Ledger is a, you know, hardware wallet. Fireblocks was built as a custody system for people who wanted to institutionally custody crypto as a hedge fund or as a venture firm. I think, you know, MetaMask and Phantom were birthed out of different ecosystems, but are like, to me, quintessential consumer wallets that, you know, I love and use. And Privy is built as this embedded wallet system, as a developer tool of a wallet. And so all of these are like different modalities. They all happen to have key management involved, but maybe the word wallet is doing a hell of a lot of work for us here. And, you know, as somebody, I guess, who competes with a lot of other embedded wallet providers, I, you know, question the premise, which is that no one's launching them, to the question of why are there power laws to wallet, meaning why do only some of them succeed, or, you know, why is it that?
Sure.
I think the L1 comparison is interesting, right? Because L1s, investors pay up, or, you know, retail pays up before value is proven, whereas the wallet traditional business model is to actually monetize flows in some way. And that only works if you have usage. So like you can launch a wallet, but if no one's using it, then it's not a good business at all. Whereas you can launch a chain, and if no one uses it, is it valuable? I don't know, but it could still be a very good business depending on like the token price. And so I think that accounts for the difference between those two dynamics. And in a sense, I think like it's a fairly healthy dynamic that, like, you know, wallet monetization is correlated to usage. In the case of Privy, I think we took a very different tack. Like a lot of my love for this space. So I started my career in crypto working at a company called Protocol Labs. So building an L1, as it were, very specialized around data storage. Hence my maybe my views on like specialization of L1s. And a lot of my interest in crypto was around privacy and around data sovereignty and around the fact that, you know, if you are not paying for the product, then you are the product. And so I think very explicitly for Privy, we don't monetize users at all. We charge developers as a SaaS business. And we've gotten sometimes, you know, some criticism of people saying, well, you know, why the fuck are you making me pay for this? Like, this should be free. I'm like, yeah, but if it is free, then we will be monetizing somewhere, because we are at the end of the day a business. And so if it is free, someone is paying. And we would much rather be very transparent around what the business model is, rather than try and basically, you know, one thing that could be done is like pay for order flow. Like you could sell the book, and this is how Robinhood makes money in part, is by, you know, having it's MEV more or less. And so the point being, I think the wallet business models are going to change over time as the definition of what a wallet is changes. Mm-hmm. I think the types of wallets, there's actually, I think we're seeing quite a bit of innovation. You named, in my opinion, 4 different wallet segments. But I think each has different business models. And I think, you know, where Phantom and MetaMask ultimately make money on swaps, on some of the services that they provide, Privy is much more of a SaaS business. And I think over time, it stands to reason that there'll be other opportunities for us to find other revenue levers that we'll have to look. And I think a core goal of mine is to make sure that these are aligned with the value that we're providing developers and value we're providing end users. But I actually think the main thing is that like wallets can only monetize insofar as they're used. But I see a lot of, you know, I look at the space, and be it across like Soulflare, Dawn, Rabby, Zerion, there's a lot of wallets doing interesting work. It's just such a power law because wallets are extremely sticky. So maybe that'll be my last point. Why do we only see some of them? I think like what wallet you use is kind of like carbon dating somebody in crypto. Like depending on what era you came into crypto on, you'll be using a certain wallet. And it's such a pain in the ass to like move your assets off a given wallet that most people don't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the point I'm making is less about like the number of wallets, because
Sure.
I'm sure there's a ton and I just am not really in that world much. But if you think about the most hyped projects,
Sure.
like Fireblocks raised a ton of money,
Yeah.
you know, in 2020 or whatever it was. Like you just haven't seen that same thing happen this cycle. It seems like. I wonder if there's a comparison here to be made with like social media platforms. Where, you know, there's been lots and lots of social media platforms launched over the years, but ultimately the few big ones still capture the vast majority of the value and the usage in that sector. And so do wallets sort of become the same thing over time?
I mean, you know, maybe there's a point, which is Einstein's definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different outcomes. I mean, maybe it's a good sign that basically I think the wallet layer, there's so much work to do on the UX still, especially with regards to on-ramps, which I think is the major inhibitor right now to like mainstream usage of crypto. But we've solved, I think, a lot of the effective problems. If you're a consumer, you know, my understanding is that a lot of phantom usage comes from TikTok videos. Talk about like, you know, mainstream and being able to tap into like other sources of people who are getting into crypto. These are like, you know, folks, you know, I hear about my niece in high school who thinks about, you know, crypto as phantom. And so I actually think it's probably a sign of like the space maturing. I guess I debate the fact maybe there haven't been major rounds raised by, you know, wholly new companies. We raised around a little over $40 million. So it's a fairly healthy set of things. But like, you know, I think Phantom raised around their Series C from Sequoia relatively quickly. I think Fireblocks is an extremely mature, robust business. And so I just think this is the space maybe maturing and coming together. And I guess I'm excited that we're not seeing today what we saw in 2021, what we saw in 2017. It actually means we're moving on to different parts of the stack and building anew. But, you know, bringing it back to like an internet comparison, you had a moment where people were building, you know, Ethernet and coax and Wi-Fi. I'm kind of mixing up my layers here. It's a good thing that mostly we've settled now on the network layer of the internet and we're focused on things closer to the application layer and so on. And so I think we're just moving up on where innovation's happening.
Yeah, interesting. I want to drill down a bit. You touched on like on-ramps you think are the biggest issue today. Because I think in a lot of ways, like crypto UX has gotten a lot better just like under our feet over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And the thing that sort of made this sink into me was getting the Solana Seeker phone, which has like, I guess it has like an embedded wallet that I think I sort of like have connected to Phantom or something. But I just remember like messing around, like switching apps, and like everything worked pretty smoothly with the wallet. And when I compare that to what it felt like in say 2023 to try to use like the Uniswap mobile app or something like that, it's just a completely different experience now. And like embedded wallet providers like yourself and just a lot of the other infrastructure that's been built out, it feels relatively seamless, like almost like using Apple Pay in some cases,
Sure.
Even on mobile. And so it does feel like in a lot of ways the UX is actually really good. And that was so it's easy to be like pretty optimistic about where things are, but it sounds like there's also these like pain points. So I'm curious to ask, what's actually bad? what need like on ramping? Say more about that. And are there other things too that you think that wallets still haven't quite cracked?
Yeah. I'm thinking broadly, I think there may be three. First, and there's a difference between things that are actually not solved versus things that are solved. I actually think cross-chain, cross-asset connectivity is still really bad. The fact that I have to be, you know, matching, even though this is programmable digital money, even though we have, you know, via Jupiter, via Radium, like all of the facilities that we need in order to be able to swap between assets seamlessly. The fact that there's still, you know, that this is like you go to Europe and you've got an American plug, like these connector issues like keep happening. Yeah. And there's no, like, I think theoretical reason that it should be the case, except that we need to productize this better. And that's something that we're very focused on at Privy. But that's one still, which is these kind of like, lost in translation issues. I have digital assets. I just have the wrong digital assets. And so I'm hosed. That's one. I think the second is around on-ramps. And I actually think this is not a crypto problem. This is a fraud problem. This is a payments problem. And the reason, there's some regulatory clarity needed in order for on-ramping to become simpler and for apps to embrace it. There have been some changes made to like Google Store and App Store, like rules that like make this easier on mobile. But generally, this is an issue around like KYCs being rejected. The core issue is like one, KYCing sucks, but that's, a regulatory question and something that we can solve. But the second is that, 40% fails because this is such a hard fraud problem because you're moving into an asset space where transactions are irreversible. So unlike fraud where I buy something, but ultimately the payment can be stopped and like things can be done here, I buy a digital asset and then poof, it's gone. If I happen to be not who I say I am, or using a credit card, I'm going to cancel, or doing chargebacks or whatever else it is. So I actually don't know what the right path for on ramps are. That's where I'm excited, obviously, by the work that Stripe's doing here, and there are a number of others. But I actually think once you have crypto, the experience is broadly coming together really well, and we're making so much progress. If you don't, you're still in a very different world, and the activation energy to entering the space is extremely high. So that to me is the biggest problem still. And then I would argue that on a sort of more global scale, the issues that remain are around off-ramping. So I have crypto, great. How do I spend it in the real world? To your point earlier, this is why I think card issuance is really, really important. It's like ultimately building banking relationships with every country in the world so that I can off-ramp from crypto to fiat is extremely hard, is a real world, not a software problem. And Visa and MasterCard have built these incredible networks that you could actually use to spend stablecoins directly. And, Bridge is doing this, but Rain is doing this, Coolupa is doing this. These are the companies that maybe make crypto spendable in the real world. So I think, like, in a sense, if the crypto economy is an electric circuit, you need to be able to close the circuit for current to go through. And that means having good off-ramps. And that means banking partnerships. That means card issuance. And over time, it means getting to a place where every merchant accepts crypto natively. So you have to do neither of those things. But I think those are the main gaps that, like, really remain. So, and then everything else is about packaging it together really well.
So by hard issuance, that is like establishing local banking partnerships in other nations where like you can natively get the
fiat back. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's a major question I would ask for stablecoins. When are stablecoins actually cheaper than the fiat alternative? Fiat to stablecoin transfers cost similar prices as fiat to fiat transfers, but stablecoin to stablecoin transfers are much, much cheaper, much, much faster, much, much more efficient. And so that last leg is really important.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so basically like everything but the on and off ramp works decently well, but if you're trying to get the money onto the blockchain or off of the blockchain, I guess. And that makes sense.
But that's what's so exciting about now, in my opinion, is that we're finally entering an era where I think the flywheel is there and it's starting to spin, because as more people globally receive stable coins, that is their entryway. It is going to be their entryway into crypto. They are getting digital assets for the first time. They are preferring it because, like, if we can make on-ramps easier, then people will get paid out in stable coins. They will choose it because it's a stable currency. And now they have digital assets. So they can find ways to off-ramp, or they can, spend digitally. So either through, e-commerce, through agentic commerce, or moving forward, through DeFi and other means. And so I think we've really primed the pump, and we need to work on these things. But I've never seen a more exciting time actually to have crypto impact the world broadly.
Mm-hmm. How do you think, like, what you're building relates to credit card companies? Like, do you see them as competitive or?
No, we see ourselves very much as like a platform, a plug. Maybe the joke that's not a meme I should carry through, but is like, Privy in the UK means toilet. And we didn't know this when we named the company, and we like stuck to it because we were like, yeah, you know what? This is fair. We build the pipes that allow anybody to connect into the core money accounts. And so we're building these money accounts. We're building these modular, programmable money accounts that are tied to a person. We're, an identity company. We're a wallets company. And I see, cards as a rail that benefits users when they plug them into the account. So I see on-ramps, off-ramps, I see exchanges, I see apps, I see card networks. as all of these like basically connectors that you can build into your account to make it more powerful and to make it do better work for you. So I see them as a complement is I guess the long answer to this.
Okay. Do you think that in general, like, because I think a lot of like stable coins, wallets type people don't really like credit card companies or see themselves as trying to disrupt these incumbent credit card companies. And I think there's maybe good reasons you would want to. Like credit cards broadly, I don't think have been great for merchants. They've, you know, in the US at least, they charge these high fees. And for a long time, you couldn't, you had to bake that into the price. You couldn't like charge a separate cash price. I think that's changed due to a recent court ruling. Candidly, I need to brush up on my research on that. But either way,
there's fit right in at the TradFi conference.
Exactly. I just slinging words. But you know, historically, when I've talked to people in the stablecoin world or in the wallet world, there's like an antagonism towards credit card companies, and like we want to unseat these entrenched incumbents that make all this money and don't, you know, work well for the users. But it sounds like you're a little more pro credit cards. Or the companies.
So I've never described myself as. I've honestly never given it that much thought as to whether I'm pro credit card. I think I'm pro competition to some extent, which is not necessarily a hot take, but basically I think you see this in the way that Visa and MasterCard are embracing stable coins, which is they understand the power of the change that might be coming and the ways in which consumers are going to vote with their feet and with their money in terms of the rails that they want to pick. And, you know, certainly merchants would rather not pay these fees. And I think what we're seeing is some version of a world where incumbents will have to adapt or die. And so I don't have anything against the modality. I think the response to the market change and to the new technology is going to be very positive, and it'll either unseat the incumbents or it'll make them more consumer friendly and more competitive in the marketplace. So I'm very pro, I think, the competition that stablecoin rails will build into credit cards. I think I'm also very realistic about the fact that today, depending on the countries that you serve, by sending out stablecoin payments, the last mile is really hard, and sometimes card networks are the best way to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of my view. I don't know that I ascribe like necessarily these are the great evil to be defeated. I think, frankly, the march of technology will mean that they will either adapt or they will be defeated by not doing so.
Yeah, and I think that's a well put point. Like a lot of the pathologies of credit card companies that people can point to would be benefited by competition that compress your fees. And
if they're not, then we will, by the definition, basically defeat these issues, because either they will be sort of the patient will be cured or the patient will die. But one of the two is going to have to happen.
True. Okay. The last question I wanted to ask you is just sell me a bit on agentic payments, because I saw this OpenAI announcement that was sort of lumped in with the Stripe open issuance stuff. I saw it and I was a little bit like, what? Why? I don't know. I don't know if I'm a believer. I don't really know what to make of it. So just steelman it for me. Explain why agentic payments are going to be a big deal, and how do crypto rails kind of fit into all of that?
Yeah, I think the by the way, I saw this agentic payments thing that kind of like, you know, gotten stuck in with the like open issuance stuff. It's a very crypto native viewpoint of yours. I'm guessing there's some AI people being like, and there's this weird open issuance thing that they talked about alongside the
but they're not
the
related.
Agentic payments. Sorry?
But they're not related, you're saying?
No, I'm just saying like it's funny that I saw it the same way you did, which was like I was focused on the stablecoin parts of like everything that was released. I think again this is a question of emergent technologies. I'm French. We invented the Minitel. Minitel, first major used, basically online service, about 9 million subscribers, I think, in the early 90s, much bigger than the internet. Closed. There's a lesson in here somewhere, which is like closed source, government mandated, got completely shredded by like TCP/IP and open standards, more or less, as the internet. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think there are emergent behaviors to open systems that you can't predict. I think agents and I think AI, we're so early. I think it was the Karpathy paper that like kind of birthed Gen AI as we know it is, I think 2017. ChatGPT is December 2022. So we're, call it, this is a much more recent experiment than Bitcoin in a lot of ways. And yet we're seeing it reshape our world in a number of ways. And I think the question is, as these agents become more proficient, as they can do more for us, commerce is obviously something we'd want to do. What if your agent had a built-in call it wallet. I'll use the word and take it to mean whatever you want. Built-in wallet that they could use where they have an allowance so they can do things on your behalf, from booking plane tickets to making a microtransaction. Like, very interesting point about microtransactions. It used to not be that great a model. Charging per article if you were a news site didn't make sense because the activation energy on charging 50-cent fee once versus getting you to buy a $10 subscription was about the same. Like, paying for it costs about the same in terms of your energy. And yet the LTV of the subscriber is so much greater than the one-time micropayment. I think crypto changes that. So we can now work in minuscule payments with none of the overhead and fees that, credit card networks will charge. And I think agents change that, in that the actual activation energy to making a purchase goes way down. So I think the exact shape of what agentic, or at least for me, the exact shape of what agentic commerce looks like is unclear. But it stands to reason that if I think about my day and the interactions I have with the world, many of them are centered around commerce. And as I do more with AI, it seems inevitable that I will ask agents to enable me in said commerce. And if agents have to trade, then they need a reason to do it. And so we can all get them credit cards, or maybe there's a native currency to the internet that we can help power them with, that's programmable, that can be built with safeguards. And so actually, some of my favorite stories about Privy, we were building with a really great trading app, and they wanted to enable agents to trade on consumers' behalf. And they were like, my issue is that if the LLM hallucinates, my wallet is going to get wrecked. The wrong order gets put through, I buy the wrong asset, et cetera, et cetera. So can you please build Privy policies to safeguard what the wallet is able to do? And this is how we actually built our first wallet policies, to limit how much could be spent on a daily basis by a wallet. And these are very expressive policies today, but it started off with this use case. And today we serve neobanks who want these exact same policies to say, Blockworks should have $1 million purchase cap on their account unless they get an additional authorization from these two people. It's the same policy system, but it was born in a very, I think, frontier market, which was agentic trading, and it has now made its way to fintech. And so that's my steel man for basically agentic commerce, which is these are very powerful forces at play, and I think very complementary forces at play. I think we're only scratching the surface today, and defining exactly what the interaction model will be like is at least, something I can't do. But I think building for optionality and for tooling that reduces the friction needed to make intelligent decisions about commerce feels kind of like an inevitability. And so that's, I think, what we're building towards.
And for the payment side of crypto, that sounds like a huge opportunity, right?
A huge opportunity. And, if you want to talk about throughput issues that we're having with global commerce, think about what's happened to compute. Look at energy usage. This is not a good take, but the complaints that we had about crypto energy consumption are dwarfed by AI energy consumption today. And, NVIDIA has written crypto to AI to crypto waves from 2017 to 2021, where people always needed GPUs for a reason or other. And I think if you look at the way energy and compute spend has gone up, then now think of money as programmable, and think about money spend going up, and think about what that's going to do to throughput and transaction rates going through blockchains if this world pans out. And I think that puts more color on the fact that we're barely scratching the surface. We're orders of magnitude off in terms of what needs to be built for these systems to have the impact they can have. And I think if nothing else, rather than chain tribalism, I think this should be a huge kick in the pants to anybody building in the space, because the opportunity is so big.
I kind of want to end it there. I'll if there's orders of magnitude to be done, we have to get you back to the office,
please,
and back building. But it's Henri. It's been a really fun conversation. Covered a lot and sort of took us outside of the Solana insider world for a day, and so it was really interesting to just hear a lot of your takes on crypto. Congratulations on the new announcements, and best of luck with everything you're doing with Privy still.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss not to say, I think a major part of our work, from a volume to users to an app serve standpoint, happens in Solana. And so that is that remains the major part of many of the investments that we make. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone. If you made it this far into the episode, we would love a thumbs up or a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, and we will see you all again very soon.